Hello, I am delighted to be joined by a celebrated composer and Olivier Award winner, Jocelyn Pook. Among her many credits, she's scored films for Stanley Kubrick, Eyes Wide Shut, for a movie adaptation of The Merchant of Venice in 2004 starring Al Pacino, and for Mike Bartlett's play King Charles III. Much more besides. But tonight we are here to talk about her project, Drawing Life. Jocelyn, thanks so much for joining me. Tell me a little bit about how this project came about. It's a JMI commission.
Yes, and Sophie Solomon, who was at that time director of JMI, just approached me out of the blue to see if I would be interested in writing a piece, some kind of work to commemorate the 70th anniversary of the disintegration of Terezin concentration camp.
That's a hard ask. I mean, that, as a composer, as a creative artist, the idea of embarking on that territory, I imagine, would have filled you with some degree of pause.
Yes. I mean, it's a subject I'm very interested in, the Second World War. My mum had been a flautist in ENSA, the travelling touring orchestras, when she was very young, just a student. And I was always really interested in that period of history and, in fact, read obsessively about it. But I have to say that I think I would have found it too much to have done a project about one of the death camps. But Terezin was a transit camp. And, of course, one of the main things they wanted me to focus on in this project was the children's poems and drawings that were discovered there after the war. And,
because Terezin, or Theresienstadt, as it's also known,
yes.
Was, as you say, it was a very different proposition. It was a show camp in some respects. Can you just talk us through what the Nazis planned to do with it and how it operated?
It was a trickery, really. I mean, a lot of elderly Jews were encouraged to sell up and buy into going there. It was a kind of a model, it was supposed to be a model ghetto.
And a place where eventually many of them would be transported to death camps.
Yes.
And while they were there, were living in really horrendous conditions, except when visiting dignitaries would come, where they were forced to sort of put on a show. I mean, it's grotesque.
Yes, I mean, there's a particular incident when the Red Cross visited, and they... Weeks beforehand, they were preparing, they were repainting, they were even rehearsed some scenes. They invented sort of coffee houses, and they had a particular route they were going to show the Red Cross around, and apparently they didn't divert from that, they didn't ask. It was a bit like a film set. It's beautifully written about by Helga Weissover, who was a child then at that time, and she wrote about it in her diaries, which have survived, and she wrote how it was like, overnight, it was like some fairy tale, that because things were happening so rapidly overnight, all these signs appeared, which, to the park, to the, as if it's a spa town, Yes, they went to great lengths to deceive the world that this was a different kind of place. And they even made a film, a kind of propaganda film, later on.
Once you decided then to take on this commission from JMI, what sort of research did you start doing? What sources did you find?
Well, I mean, I did start with the poems and drawings, which were collected in a book called I Never Saw Another Butterfly, which had just come out that year, I think, or just been reissued. I happened to be in Prague several years before that, and I visited the Jewish Museum there and seen these drawings, which really had an effect on me. And it's a beautiful collection as well. The poems are extraordinary. So that was my starting point to begin with.
something like 15,000 children, I think, were sent to Terezin, of whom a tiny handful survived.
Yes, I think 100 or 150 survived.
And so what sort of testimonies were left behind? I mean, you talk about drawings and poems. They must have been incredibly difficult to look at and to read, or was there any sense of, I don't know, light in there?
Yeah, I mean, they are extraordinarily lucid for children so young, and of course they're describing their circumstances at times, which are extremely bleak, and but also they're really, what struck me about them as well was the celebration of life, which is, you know, really strong in so many of those poems, really, as I say, lucid. It's just so extraordinary for children so young, because they're so close to, they're seeing so much death around them, of which sometimes they describe in these poems. But they also kind of, it's equally making them aware of the beauty and fragility of life and living and being alive.
And it wasn't just poetry and drawings, you also sought out spoken testimony.
Yes, well after that, yes, then I wanted to hear people's accounts, and thankfully there are a lot of recorded testimonies, videoed and recordings, so I started listening to these and really, they're not just about the account of being there, but also the journey, what happened, but the account of what happened before that. Some of them talk about how their parents sold everything in order to pay to go to Terezin, you know.
Well, when we finally arrived in Theresiensdadt, which it was Theresiensdadt, they opened up the doors, and first time we seen daylight. It's a terrible feeling after being in the dark for so long.
Everybody got off the train.
And the Germans were running around like crazy with the bayonets and with sticks and chasing us.
Quick. Pushing. Quick. Shouting and
Schnell, raus. Schnell, raus.
Schnell, los.
Screaming and yelling. Schnell.
The SS came with dogs.
Schnell, raus.
Shouting and
Dogs.
madness.
Get out of here.
Shouted.
Schnell, los.
Schnell.
Terrible confusion.
Shouting and
Dogs.
shouting and dogs and cows.
Dogs.
Pushing. Schnell, los, hurry up.
Schnell, raus. Hurry up. Get out of here.
Schnell, los.
Schnell, raus. Line up. Get out of here.
And with your composer hat on, to have these sonic fragments of material, does that then start inspiring you with little melodic ideas or
Yes,
fragments?
it did. I started to find their voices kind of creeping into the compositions, and I started to hear the tunes in some of the spoken words and phrases and the rhythms. So yeah, it started to really inform some of the music. So I did find some of the pieces kind of went more in that direction, and also the stories and the narratives, that memories that are being spoken about. Sometimes I was using their voices in the music for that sort of material, and other times for musical material, or both, a mixture. I found also that I'm very fascinated by the voice, because I've done a lot of work with that, my answer phone messages and all sorts of sources of spoken voice that I play with, and pick out and draw out sort of elements. But I find the spoken voice is like an oral photo. It's like you immediately recognize somebody when you hear their voice, when you pick up the phone, and just from that little information of what's in the voice, the textures, and it's so much is picked up instantly, like a photo. It's and it's just endlessly fascinating to me. And I think also with the testimonies, people speaking so sometimes, movingly, with such emotion about certain things they're talking about. This voice is just loaded with this emotion and history and life lived in these voices. And there's such precious material.
Is there a temptation as a composer, when you have voices talking about such highly emotive and difficult subjects, to make the music too sentimental or too wallowy? Do you feel then that it's incumbent upon you in a way to keep the score quite neutral, to allow those voices to reveal themselves, or how does the music sit next to those voices?
I sort of sometimes see where they lead me. I'm trying to watch out for too much sentimentality. I am very aware of that sort of possibility. But I like the mystery. Sometimes I'm led into unexpected areas with a voice tune, or I think also what people are talking about is often more mundane and everyday. Practical things, what to pack, agonizing about what to pack.
I didn't know anything except that it was a place where there are only Jews and where we are all deported to, and there isn't much food to eat. So everybody who went had one suitcase.
We packed, suitcases and suitcases.
We were allowed to have 50 kilos each, which of course no way could we lift 50 kilos each. We were extremely well equipped. We were equipped as if we were going on a luxury cruise or luxury holiday camp. We had sleeping bags and sort of jumpsuits.
We took on us the best clothes, sometimes 2 shirts.
Good shoes, warm clothing, dry sausages, some fat and some sugar, and sardines were at a premium.
Rucksack, haversack, handbag, sleeping bag, bedroll, blanket, shoes, sturdy, underwear, woolen stocking, water flask, coat, and mess tin, matches, torch, towel, canteen, candles, and garlic, feeding tray, saucepan, soup, and first aid kit, and a solid alcohol, scout's knife, string, on socks, cigarette sardines. $50 kilos. string and mess tin, matches, candles, torch and hairbrush, toothbrush, toothpick, dressing gown, flannel and a towel.
Small bag of toys.
One doll.
Christmas cake, butter, caramels, crackers.
Cooking fat.
Chips, biscuits.
Sheets.
Sheet music.
50 kilos per person. 50 kilos. Sardines, sausages, sweet in saucepan, socks and string and a mess tin, matches, candles, torch and a hairbrush, toothbrush, toothpick, dressing gown, flannel and a towel.
Paintbrushes.
Paper.
Pencils.
Pastels.
Paint box.
Poems of Rambo.
And
Goethe's Faust.
Frisco.
The Barge Bride.
Brundibar.
The Marriage of Figaro.
Magic
Jack folk songs.
memorized.
Notebook.
New pen.
Needle and thread.
Needle and thread.
And this one phrase that you pick up on, where are we going, which can be the germ of a whole sort of little world of a piece of music. Just introduce that for us.
Well, yes, that's the piece I was just mentioning, where the woman's recalling her terrifying journey with her mother through the night, and just not knowing where they were going. But some journeys were several days. I mean, you can't imagine really how terrifying it must be, especially for a small child. It's things like that they never forget.
It was a traumatic experience because we were travelling right through the night. I remember crying all the way and saying to my mother, "Where are we going? Where are we going?" And she said, "I don't know. I don't know. All I know is we're going to a place called Theresiensdadt." I didn't even know where Theresienstadt was. I didn't know where Czechoslovakia was.
So tell me a bit about how it became a stage work.
Well, it kind of happened quite organically. I mean, originally, when I was approached, the idea was for it to perhaps be a song cycle, the work, settings of the children's poems. And then, as I say, it developed because of the testimony voices and different kind of material creeping in. And it just seemed like it lent itself to a stage work that with images. I also wanted to use some footage of some of the survivors. And so JMI agreed, and I brought Emma Bernard in as director and dramaturge, and Dragan Alexic to do the video and visuals, and Melanie Pappenheim, a singer I work with a lot, who we collaborate very closely. So we embarked on a staged piece, which was really exciting. Later on, we brought in a second singer, Lauren Sklamberg, who's based in New York and best known as the lead singer with the Klezmatics. And after that, we brought in 5 musicians who were also performing on stage.
And as you say, the stage version allowed you to incorporate a lot of the spoken testimonies where there were just fragments in the music. You could allow those to breathe. And I want to just talk about one of the incredible characters within that, Zdenka. Tell me about her. What was her story?
Yeah, well, I mean, we were really fortunate to be able to, meet and spend time with Zdenka van Clover and film her and record her. And I used her voice a lot in the music and hear her stories firsthand.
What was the story of the Tin Ring?
The Tin Ring is the story of her time during the war. She was a teenager when she was sent to Terezin, and she fell in love with a boy there who made her a tin ring before he was sent off to the east. And she kept the ring, hoping they would be reunited one day. She survived 6 concentration camps subsequently and ended up in Bergen-Belsen, where she caught typhoid and almost didn't survive. But when the camp was liberated, she managed to crawl to a Red Cross post where she was saved by a British soldier.
I think she weighed something obscene, like 77 pounds or something. I mean, she virtually did not make it through.
Yes. I just know that she never found the name of that soldier. She dedicated the book to him. It's a very moving book. But what was great about our chats was also hearing more about life in Terezin and what it was like. There were a huge number of writers, intellectuals, artists, musicians, theatre directors and actors passing through. And despite the dire conditions, the camp became a hub of creative activity. They were able to put on, lectures, concerts at times, and she was in plays. She could still remember the songs from some of I think she was in one of the operas, so it was...
So it does sound like, having initially slightly hesitated about this very dark project, you did quite quickly start finding the chinks of light of the ways in which human beings, even in those situations, are determined to find a little speck of happiness.
I think so, yes. The resilience and that through culture as well, through art. That's very, very moving, very life-affirming as well, yeah. And just the different ways of doing that they managed to find.
Interesting as a creative artist working today, when in a lot of ways the arts are somewhat sidelined in our culture, to meet a generation of people for whom culture was somehow saved them, kept them sane.
Yes.
Must have been very powerful indeed as a reminder, if one were needed, that things like music and art are not just nice to have, they're essential to keep our humanity.
They're nourishment, they really are. They are essential.
As it happened that the biggest number of the inmates were Czech Jews, so that a great number of artists, established artists, actors, directors, musicians, composers, conductors,
who were already famous before the war in Prague cultural life came in. So there was a great number of very exceptional people. Audience was very grateful. And in the concerts, when they listened to the music, which didn't belong to that kind of surrounding, it was sort of a different world. It was not entertainment. It was a moral support. The people who were sitting in the audience, and also us on the stage, for the hour and a half, we were transported into previous life and the dignity of life and the hope of life. That this will finish and we will go back and start again.
So Draw What You See. Tell me a little about that.
The title is taken from a child in Terezin called Helga Weissova, who later became an artist. And she was very busy making lots of drawings and sketches while she was there. And her father saw some of these and said, she was drawing then at first things that she remembered from home, from back when, before the world changed. And happy memories. But then her father said, yeah, okay, but no, now, draw what you see. And that's what he told her to do. And she did thereafter. And some of her drawings are, again, extraordinary depictions of life in Terezin at that time through the eyes of a child.
For the children, the place didn't matter at all. They couldn't care less where they were. First of all, what was important, there was Mummy, maybe even Daddy, before he was taken off to the east. Mummy was still there. There were new friends, a lot of them. And what was interesting, that the children were painting things they remembered, like school and snowman and ice cream and that sort of thing. Whereas Hoshkova, who did the same thing, showed it to her father. And her father looked at it and said, no. Draw what you see.
children's confidence in life and in people, to prevent them falling into moral decay and despair, to ensure that they live in hope, poetry, music, history, whatever they could, to uphold children's confidence in life and in people, to prevent them falling into moral decay and despair, to ensure that they live in hope, to teach them art, poetry, music, history, whatever they could.
That was Draw What You See by my guest Jocelyn Pook. I want to talk about Birdsong, which is an incredibly haunting piece of work from you, and it seems very characteristic of lots of your work in a way that it's about a sort of obsessive repetition and worrying away at an idea, and sometimes you use a very limited palette around that, and you'll just suddenly set it to a different colour or a different harmony. And here you get this haunting combination of words and then voices imitating birds. Can you tell me a bit about how this piece came about?
Yes, well, I mean, it's a setting of one of the poems, which in itself I feel it's a really beautiful poem.
And people who watched the JMI World Tour recently will have seen it because it was featured in that. It was the first time I heard it.
Right.
And was sort of so moved by it. It was just, it's a wonderful piece.
Oh, thank you. Yes, and I also worked very closely with Melanie, the singer on it. Melanie has an extraordinary ability to vocalise in a birdsong-like way, which I find very inspiring. And we had a lot of fun playing with this technique. Its otherworldliness felt kind of right for this piece.
But also really clever the way that you get us to listen to the words by keeping those words very limited in terms of melodically what's going on. And then suddenly, once the words are gone, the voice becomes free and it's this bird singing, and suddenly you get this hit of melody. I mean, it's a beautiful balance that you make us listen to the words so carefully by restricting all the other things around them.
Well, I'm glad you like that sort of minimalist approach. I mean, I hope, it's a very intuitive way of working, and I guess, that's what felt right. It was an artistic response to the poem and to the words, which I think are powerful in their simplicity.
And apart from the vocalists, you obviously also have these very powerful visuals.
Yes, that's Dragan Alexic. He went to Terezin, to modern-day Terezin, while we were making the project, to make his own footage. But he also found archive photos that were taken in Terezin during the war. So in the video, we are going between the present and the past.
Let's hear it now. This is Birdsong.
He doesn't know the world at all, who stays in
you've already talked about how the children and Terezin somehow find these chinks of light. There's a phrase like Terezin is full of beauty. For that to come out of the mouth of a child is shocking and wonderful at the same time, that a child would find something beautiful in a place like that. How much did you discover of the sort of full emotional, psychological lives of these children? How well did you feel you got under the surface of what they were having to live through every day and into who they were?
I mean, again, through a lot of the testimonies of the survivors, you know, I was hearing a lot about how they felt at that time. I mean, and you know, living through these experiences, because of course it all started before they were there, and when the world was changing all the time, and suddenly from going to school, they were forbidden to go to school, they were forbidden to go to parks, they were forbidden to go to libraries, they were forbidden to go to forests, they were forbidden to have cats and dogs, which, you know, it's just extraordinary. So they'd been through all that, and many of them, you know, described this. I've, you know, again read several of the autobiographies from that time and these testimonies. So then in the poems, you know, lots of sort of light and dark of their situation in Terezin is coming through, and this poem is an example of that.
Terezin is full of beauty. It's in your eyes now clear, and through the street the tramp of many marching feet I hear.
Terezin is full of beauty. It's in your eyes now clear, and through the street the tramp of many marching feet I hear. In the ghetto at Terezin, it looks that way to me, is a square kilometer of earth cut off from the world that breathes.
Death, after all, claims everyone. You find it everywhere. It catches up with even those whoever knows is in the the whole wide world is ruled with a certain justice that helps perhaps to sweeten the poor man's pain and woe. Terezin is full of beauty. It's in your eyes now clear, and through the street the tramp of many marching feet I
Jocelyn, you've talked already about the importance of really trying to dig deep into the lives of your subjects in this piece. Was it for you an act of commemoration, was it about paying tribute to their resilience? Was it also about having a lasting memorial? I'm imagining this piece for you did a lot of things.
It just felt very important to commemorate these people and what they went through.
And not, I suppose, just to define them by this one turning point in their lives, although there is a very powerful part of this piece which is exactly about that, those turning point moments where for these people they would have a stamp on a passport or a date where they had to leave their homes. Just unpick this piece for us, because it is very chilling.
I mean, yes, it sort of feels, in the show, it was like the beginning, and it was like a lot of the people are kind of remembering the date they were called to leave, or the date they went on the train, or the date they were called to leave the house, and, significant pivotal dates, or numbers, places, place names, and, their prisoner numbers or whatever. They're just etched in their memories, and they're loaded for them. Then we combined it with the images of people's passports and photos and personal belongings that were found in Terezin after the war. So it's sort of was also about their lives, their normal, happy or family lives, normal holiday photos, and, these are people just living their lives.
Until that one terrible date, or that moment.
Yes, yeah.
Thursday, 15th of March, 39.
October the 24th or the 23rd, 1942.
42.
On November 12th, 43.
In 1942.
The date was
in 1941.
The date was
September of 42.
The date was
November 11th, 1943.
in December 41.
And it was on October, I think it was the 26th of 1942.
1942.
It was December 10th.
March 11th, 1944.
It was exactly 1 month after my 12th birthday.
October 13th. October 13th, 1943.
The date was July 1942.
I was only 11 and a half. And we left at 5:30 p.m.
You've talked about the fact this has been a stage work, also an album. How does it feel to you now taking it into the stage of being an album and back to being, as it were, a purely musical work? What's that process been like?
Actually, it's been really exciting. I mean, the lockdown situation actually gave me some time to revisit it, and we'd managed to hurriedly record it. But no, I never had time to, think about developing an album with the material, and finally I did. It's been wonderful to revisit, also to finish off some pieces I started that didn't make the show. So we did some more recordings as well, some new recordings, and it's just very gratifying to have completed the project and feel that it works in its own right as an album.
And what do you hope that audiences will take away from listening to the album?
That's a difficult question, really. I don't know, and I just hope they enjoy it and get a lot out of it, and are as moved as I am by some of the stories and voices. And also it's a kind of, I hope it honours the memory of those, who went through all this.
It's worth saying that the album is called Drawing Life. You can get it at a special rate if you are a JMI member. There's a link on your screen now, and I highly advise you to listen. It's a wonderful project. Jocelyn, Pook, thank you so much for joining me. Lovely to talk to you.
Thank you.